Okay, so welcome to my talk. What have I learned about learning how to learn and roundabouts? I could have named it only learning, but nah. So boring, right? So this is me. I'm Gabriel Chauri, senior game designer at OVERRATED Digital, and these are roundabouts, which are life complicators. Present mostly in England. I will say that here are like 95%. It's not data, it's just my, my appreciation of it. So a bit of context, or why am I am so fixated with roundabouts. I learned to drive at a very young age. Probably at 9 or 10, I could drive a car on my own. And I am also Chilean, which is kind of important for the next part. And yeah, the 90s in Chile were crazy, so yeah. That was, I was driving a car at such a young age. So when I got here to England, one of the things that really surprised me, other than the unending rain, was the sheer number of roundabouts. They are a lot of them first, and there are some that are small, some that are a lot bigger, and so in Chile we don't have that many roundabouts, of course. We have a grid system, so it's just left, right, and keep straight. It's not like a lot of options. But the thing with Chilean roundabouts is that they are giant and they are very problematic. It's not like here that you can see the person on the right and you can give them, allow them to pass. It's just free for all, basically. You just have to wait, and yeah, so they are different. And people is usually not that polite. When driving, Chileans are nice, but when we got into a car, we just transform ourselves, so. While here the roundabouts, yeah, they look small, approachable, like very different and very easy looking as compared to the roundabouts in Chile. So after probably a month here, I bought my first car here, which, in case you were asking, other than the roundabouts, is that the cars are on the other side of the road, right? So everything on the car is also on the other side. So yeah, I had to go to pick up the car from Coventry, which was a 2-hour drive from where I'm living now. So I sit into the car. It was a bit strange, right? All of the parts on the other side. My right arm feel like, why is there's a door here, right? It's just different. But I say to myself, I know how to drive. I mean, it's going to be okay. Nothing to worry about. But it was all okay until I found the first roundabout, which was probably 7 seconds after I started driving. And the thing is that first, my arms and my body went to the other side, right? Instead of going to the left, I went to the right. And it was just a fraction of a second, but it was like, and after that, I started shaking. I was like super anxious, nervous, everything. And also, every roundabout after that, it was like something like this. Like, I couldn't find the third exit, the second exit. It's like, when I got into the roundabout, it's just, the exit doesn't exist anymore. So, it was probably also more like this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did this, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this is also a good one, yeah. Yeah, so I literally had to stop at a petrol station, probably an hour of driving. I still got 2 hours left after 1 hour driving because I kept going through incorrect exits. I literally had to stop at a petrol station. I called my wife and I said, like, this is everything, that I'm not going to get home, so it was nice to meet you, nice to, yeah, say our children, I love them too, yeah. So, Yeah, eventually I got there, safe, thank God. Yeah, no problem. But just the day after, I think, it was a snowy days. So it was probably a week of snow. So I took a break. I mean, in the city that I lived in Chile, we also didn't have snow. I think I have seen snow like 2 times before. So it was like, yeah, too much. I mean, I already did this. And I'm not going to drive in the snow. So I took this break. And I think to myself, but I am a game designer. Surely I can do something with this. It's like, I'm being paid to solve problems. Surely I can solve this one. So what did I find? I created this idea that I need to create a tutorial for myself to learn all the intricacies of learning this new way of learning how to drive. And the thing is that we usually, and I say probably as a game designer, and I am the first one to take the blame on this, we usually do a less than average job on creating a tutorial. We usually leave the tutorial until the end of development. We don't care about that a lot throughout development. We throw mechanics and systems, and then, yeah, players will understand. Or so I am the first to take the blame on that. So I basically created this tutorial, which also translated to my job as a game designer, but also to a different framework or having these different options for learning. So we are going to talk about setting the stage for learning, then 3 strategies for learning, or 3 frameworks. First, unlearning, then scaffolding, and there we are going to discuss the 3H framework. So setting the stage. We usually have some idea of what we want to achieve, right, a goal, and we also have an idea of how we want to achieve that. So, for example, in my case, it was driving the car, right? It just, I need to drive the car. I have a car, I need to drive it. But that's not a very good goal, right? So we can use these smart goals for making them more meaningful, more compelling. So maybe you can set a goal, but be a bit more specific. So maybe I can go to the supermarket driving the car. Okay, yeah, that sounds a bit better. We can also give the goal a time. So probably I will go on Friday to the supermarket. So yeah, it sounds a bit better. But the thing with goals is that they are kind of overrated. I don't know if you have played that game. It's very old. The driver, and this is the tutorial. Literally, they put you some goals, like do a 360 brake test, a slalom. I still don't know what a slalom is. I'm 20 years old, and it's just goals, right? There's no system for learning. There's no continuation of learning. And systems are more important. Learning systems are more important than just setting a goal. So for example, think of one of your favorite tutorials. For me, I think it's Crusader Kings 3. It's a very good tutorial in my opinion. One thing that good tutorials have is that they are contextually meaningful. So they try to understand what are players' previous experiences and build from that, and also build on previous tutorials that you have teach to your players. There's a clear cue on when the tutorial starts and when the tutorial ends. So when players have control, agency, when they don't have. Of course, reasonable instructions. So just say, do a slalom is probably not that reasonable instruction. And other thing that we usually don't take a lot into consideration is giving rewards for the tutorial. This could be systemic rewards, so probably a resource, right, some currency in the game or whatever, but also the game feel, visual effects, sound effects, all these kind of things that are really important to reward players for completing a tutorial, because we are basically teaching players, which should be rewarding in more than one way, more than just get through it and play the game. So the first takeaway, and there are 7 takeaways, so this is the first, is don't leave the tutorial until the end of the development. Maybe you don't have the content, but you can start thinking about the system very early in the production of the game. So you can start maybe thinking about what kind of tutorial it's better to communicate the systems, the mechanics, even if you don't have the full content of it. And then you can use your created system to put the content of the tutorial there. So about unlearning, so it's a weird concept, right? Unlearn, to learn. So why to unlearn? We already have more information than ever before in history. Like with the internet, you can go and learn everything. But a big portion of that information is also irrelevant, incorrect. It's maybe impractical. I mean, I know probably, I don't know, some Roman formations, like strategy formations for the military, and I still don't know why. I haven't used it, so yeah. And it's connected to that long-term memory is difficult to change, especially if that long-term memory get into our motor memory, right? So if you, for example, in a strategy game and all the units are selected with the right mouse and then with the right mouse button, and then you create a game that go with the left mouse button, your players will have a hard time trying to change that because they are used to use that finger for that. And in the case of driving, it is basically the same. As I said, like my right arm felt weird. I also drive like very close to the berm, like, yeah, not good. The body have a very good memory for that. But also our working memory, so the memory that we can use for process information, is also very limited and take mental resources. So if we are basically putting that resources into something that is not that useful, so going back to the tutorials again, probably you can, you think that putting a joke in the tutorial is nice, but that actually will distract players from the learning. I'm not saying that you can put 1 or 2 jokes, just try to be very clear for your players when that will happen. Maybe you can use a different kind of text, so it's very good for players to understand when you are talking in different ways, basically. Okay, so we need to unlearn some things, probably. So how to unlearn? First, find a need for unlearning. What do you want to achieve? And also, why do you want to achieve it, which goes back to motivation, right? And motivation is a big part of learning. We usually don't consider motivation a lot when we are talking about learning, but actually it is very important for learn and keep learning, which is part of the learning process. Identify non-useful knowledge, right? It's knowledge that is interfering. It's probably, if you're creating a tutorial, is I don't know, maybe some standard from the genre that is not useful for your game. If you are maybe driving on the other side of the road, is just looking to the right instead of the left, which is difficult. Yeah, I still sometimes, yeah. And approach it from the underlying system. So find common ground. There's usually some common ground. So good thing the pedals on the car are on the same side, because if the gas will be on the left, no, I will be dead by now. But but yeah, if you're, there's usually some general tropes or standards that you are using, so make use of them in your tutorials. And curiosity is very important also for the process of unlearning. I said that before that we have a lot of information, so make use of that curiosity for trying to be productive with your learning. And consider how a child learns. They are constantly exploring. They are not afraid of looking silly. They just try and try and try, and I don't know, they learn the word, or so they don't care a lot about that, about looking silly when they are learning. And also to increase your sense of curiosity, just pursue unfamiliar things. Maybe, as I said, it's Roman strategy formations or medieval towns or whatever. Maybe sometimes you will use it. But yeah, try to keep it to a minimum, and we will talk about that in a bit. If you don't believe me that you have to unlearn to learn, maybe you can hear to Yoda. So you must. I'm not going to make a Yoda voice. You're already there. So you must unlearn what you have learned, right? In order to learn about learning, and yeah, I don't know. Sorry. So yeah, sometimes our previous learning can get in the way of actually learning, and our adulthood sometimes, our pride of being adults can also get in the way of that. So approach these difficult new tasks with humbleness and curiosity, like a child. And also identify, third takeaway, identify previous knowledge that you have or that your players have, so you can maybe streamline some parts of your tutorial. You can also, for example, ask your players if they are familiar with the, I don't know, turn-based strategy, or if they are familiar with the first version of their game, or things like that. And then you can modify the tutorial accordingly. So the next framework is scaffolding, which is a mixture of various things. So the first concept is exploration and exploitation. Curiosity is important, but actually the balance between curiosity and applying that knowledge is a bit more important, or way more important, I would say. Because exploration is all these concepts of finding the new knowledge, reading, while exploitation is using that knowledge that allows you to master what you are doing. It's a hand-on practice, basically. But of course, both exploration and exploitation have their problems. For if you explore too much, right, if you are only learning, only reading only reading and only into the theory of things and not the practice, you generate too much anxiety and mental clutter, because you are not actually doing anything with that. While too much exploitation generates disengagement, right? If you are only doing and doing and doing, and you are not having a feedback process of learning, you are disengaged. So maybe you are asking why I have a mustache. It's not something that I decided, because I was how can I say it? I was working on a call center, and I was so bored of doing the same that I started to maximum disengagement, right? So I ended up with this. So it's really important to give players feedback on how they are doing, so you can keep the balance between exploration and exploitation, right? If you give feedback to your players, they can adjust their strategies accordingly. So maybe you can use a dynamic system, which is easier said than done, but that tracks players, and maybe if they are not doing very well in the tutorial and they are failing, you need to give feedback to your players on how they are doing and why they are not maybe understanding the system correctly. And the next part of scaffolding is this concept of zone of proximal development, which is basically a psychology concept that talks about a more experienced peer, which is for schools, basically, help the less experienced peers to learn something new. So it's basically what happens in the schools when when you enter the school, some kids know how to read, others don't. But the ones that know how to read usually help the ones that don't know how to read to learn reading, right? I remember that the teacher usually sit the one child that know how to read, the other that don't, and basically it makes everything faster. And also this foster a challenge from exploration to exploitation, right? And some researchers say that 20% exploration and 80% exploitation is like a good ratio of when you're learning something. But others say that it depends on the process, right? If you are learning something new, completely new, maybe more exploration, and then you can change that ratio. But for maintaining our constant learning, it's probably 20-80%. So the fourth takeaway is mind the balance between reading and doing, right? Between the practice and theory and practice. And offer feedback to your players. Offer feedback on how well they are doing. In my case, a good feedback for me when I finally got to the supermarket was a beer, just a simple beer I wanted to, to drink, so that was a good feedback, right? And the fifth takeaway is remember that you are leading your players you are basically teaching your players new knowledge, right? Usually your game will have some new systems, some new mechanics, something new. So you have to be empathic about it. You really have to be empathic with your players and help them throughout and guide them throughout the tutorial, while also giving them the opportunity to explore on their own, to exploit, right? And the third framework is the 3H, which stands for head, heart, and hands. So there are a variety of learning methods. Some will say, I am a visual person, I'm better at listening, I am a practice-based person. Well, most of it is a lie, at least according to the researchers. Because a mixed approach actually is far better than only reading, only visual feedback, only listening feedback. A mixture of those is by far more effective. Because yeah, just one layer of learning is enough. It's just if you are only reading the book, but you are maybe, I don't know, not taking notes or not applying something like that, it's just, yeah, it's not that useful later for you. And most of us are visual, and then we complement with other methods, right? Maybe if you have some training as a musician, maybe you are better to learning podcasts, or maybe not, I don't know. So it's just, we are basically visual, and then we complement with other learning methods. But a mixed approach is always by far the best. So the 3H framework was created for online school education. And yeah, the head stands for reading, memorizing, the boring stuff. Heart is why this is important, and it goes back to motivation, right? Why these things that I am learning matter. Maybe if you are playing a game, it's, for example, again, if one of my favorite tutorials is Crusader Kings, so maybe I want to apply some of this knowledge of medieval towns or medieval warfare to the game, which by far hasn't been the case, but that's what's important to me. That's my motivation. And hands is applying to practice, right? Taking notes, making tactile. As I said, the long-term memory, especially the motor memory of the body, is very powerful. So you have to use your body also to learn in that way. So if we are applying it directly to tutorials, for example, you can use text, you can explain the rules, which is the most common tutorial. But you can also shed some lights on some strategies that player can use. Civilization do something like that with the, I think in Civ 4 probably, they have these seed tips or seed notes, and it's basically why this is important and how you can use it. In Crusader Kings, again, they have a different text. It's gray, and they explain how you can use that thing that they are teaching you. But also you can communicate the narrative to make it important through the tutorial, not apart from the tutorial, but embed the tutorial with the narrative. And the hands is actually letting players fail, make it dynamic, which again, it's easier said than done, as you probably know. So the sixth takeaway of the seventh, so we are getting there, is that mixing methods is by far the most powerful way of teaching a tutorial. So use a mixture of videos, images, dynamic tutorials. And the last but not least takeaway is that the why is super important, the motivation. If you are teaching your players or if you want to learn something, the why is really important to motivate you and to keep you learning. So we are going back again to the roundabouts like I was driving like. Yeah, I know more than I should about roundabouts right now. I know also why here in England we drive on the other side of the road. I'm not going to spoil that for you. Yeah, there is this roundabout which is, they communicated at 5, but there are actually 7 roundabouts because there is one inside and one outside, and the magic roundabout, yeah, magic. And there is another which is an hexagon roundabout, and there's, yeah, I'm not going to get there. But I also know in the most positive side, knowing about roundabouts is good, but I also know more about learning, which is nice for myself, for my studies, but also for understanding how to teach effectively to players. So really I apply this knowledge and literally crafted a tutorial to relearn how to drive. I don't have a picture here, but I created a small Notion database. I divided tasks into exploration, exploitation. Maybe this is more hard hands, and yeah, I probably spent also too much time on that, too much exploration. The best way was basically go and drive as safe as I can. Yeah, thus far it has been pretty safe. And as I said, like people here is very polite when driving, and so it has been a very good experience. And I know how to take a roundabout now, which is also nice, because there are a lot of them. So here are the 7 key takeaways, and thank you very much. And you can find me on Game Design Thinking. This is Gabriel Chauri, and these are roundabouts. There in the end, you can see the roundabouts in the background, of course. This is it. Thank you. So I think we have some 15 minutes for questions. So yeah, if you have any question, just shoot me. What is the magic roundabout? Yeah, look, I don't think it's very visible here, but there is a big roundabout outside. There is an inner roundabout here, and there are 5 roundabouts. And actually, it's I think one of the only parts of Britain that you drive to the other hand in a part of the roundabout. You can see here that the inner roundabout goes to the right, right? I would be okay with that in my first drive. But yeah, that's the magic roundabout. It's like, it's not a kind of roundabout, it's a real roundabout. It's in Swindon, I think, so yeah, good work.
Hello, thank you for the talk. Would you say it was easier to create a tutorial for yourself or for players?
No, it's easier for me. Yeah, of course, because I kind of know myself. So in some way, I had a pretty good idea of what will be maybe the best ways to approach that. Of course, for players, I think it really depends on a previous exploration. So maybe you, as I said, it's very important to define your game maybe with a genre, which standards are you following, which standards are you breaking, what are the new things that you are doing in this game. From that exploration, trying to think about how will be the best way to approach tutorials. Of course, if you, for example, are launching the second part of your game or the third, you maybe have some data. You can use forums to ask your players maybe what some part of the game mean to them, and you have more tools if you have already worked on that kind of game. So that's something that where you can grab some information, some data, and create a better tutorial for players.
Sorry. So next question, and I forgot about it now. So maybe I should make a tutorial by remembering my questions. And you said about like thinking about like tutorial early. Would you say that like actual game dev right now should actually like take that more seriously and like make more better process and pipelines to actually include them very, very early?
So your question is if developers basically should start to care more about tutorials from, as I said, I think that we usually leave tutorials to the end of development, right? Because of course it makes sense because we don't have all the content when we start production. But I think that we can make a better work if we start to, even if you start like an early exploration from early on development, again, maybe taking some ideas from other games, taking some ideas from your previous games and see what works, what not. That's, I think, probably the very minimum. But I think, this is my take, that we can start to devise a system from early in production. So that will be useful also for producers, because they will know maybe how much time that system will take, or at least have a better idea. That will be useful for coders, because they will have the opportunity to explore. Maybe if you, again, as Crusaders Kings, they have this idea of embedded tooltips. So all of that is not really easy to code. But if you allow enough time, maybe you can create a better system for your tutorial in the end. Yeah, that's
Thank
my
you.
my hope.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the talk. It was great. And my question to you is, definitely makes a lot of sense to think about tutorial early on, since it's the part of the game that is played for most of the players. So every player starts from there, but not all of them get to the end. So there's more hours that players invest on it. And what I want to ask is about when you said about feedback when the player not following through well. Would you also use the 3H way of thinking, or do you have any good examples for this kind of feedback and how to do it, like in a way that you don't lose track of the player, you don't lose his interest?
Yeah, that's actually part of the difficulties of creating a tutorial, right? Because as you said first, I think we all have had the experience of stop playing a game because the tutorial, it was so difficult to track, so difficult to follow, and it's just not engaging, not enticing enough to keep you playing. And the other part of your question, I think it goes back to this idea of exploration and exploitation. And again, I have been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3. But for example, you have a very hand-holded tutorial at the start. They actually attack you with a lot of screens, but you can go basically a bit on your own on that, and then they just leave you to it. And you have some wars, and you have, I don't know, a leech call you to help you in the war or whatever. And the game doesn't necessarily force you to engage in a tutorial if you don't want. You can dismiss it. But if the game, I don't know about this, but it seems to me that they keep some of the tutorials on the top part of the UI. So if you are not doing like very well, you are doing poorly, I don't know, calling your levies or everything, you can always click the tutorial which is there, and it's contextually meaningful again, because you are having a war, so you have a tiny screen there that you can press and you can review the war tutorial and how to call your levies, and yeah, I'm in that part of the game. So yeah, but I think that's a way to approach it. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello?
Nope.
Is that working? Cool. I think some of my question was just answered, but I was going to ask, what are kind of like good tutorials that keep a person engaged? So I've heard before, so if this is completely false, that text tutorials are generally quite bad. What is and also to unlearn what you already know about most tutorials that exist, how do you then try and create something that is fresh and will keep a player sort of interested? So I played Chivalry recently because it was free on PlayStation Plus, and my friend, he wanted to join the game that we were in, and it forced him into tutorial, and he was like, I'm not playing, straight away.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you kind of like make it interesting and sort of not force people out of the game so that they can get into the game?
Yeah, I think that there are two parts of that question that I would like to answer. One part is that text is not like text tutorials are not inherently bad. It depends actually again of your genre, right? If you are playing maybe a strategy game, most players know that they have to read, because sometimes, I don't know, if it's a very complex game, you know that you need to read a lot of things. But if you have a more action approach, action game, maybe players are not. Maybe players don't want to do that, right? They just go straight into action. So I don't think that text tutorials are inherently bad. It just depends on how do you use them, right? And the other part is that I think that forcing tutorials in general is not a good idea. Again, because maybe some players, if you are playing XCOM 2, you already know most of the systems. And imagine if XCOM 2 forced you to play a tutorial without even asking you, have you played XCOM 1, or are you familiar with the turn-based strategy genre? If they don't give that opportunity to you, it's just losing players, assuming that everything is new, and probably it's not like that. So I think that forcing players to engage in the tutorial, especially in a multiplayer game, is very common that it has happened to me also I think it was in the early days of Heroes of the Storm, that the game forced you to play a tutorial. So I also invited a friend, and hey, are you going to play with us? And I am in a tutorial. It's like 30 minutes into a tutorial. So yeah, usually forcing players to play a tutorial without even asking them I mean, why not allow your players to fail, right? It's just, and that goes back to give them feedback. you can make the tutorial less invasive in some ways, and maybe putting some things in the HUD, in the UI, maybe to help them notice, you don't know how to play, do you want a tutorial? So, yeah, that would be a good idea in my opinion. Thank you.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for the talk. That was really interesting. My question is, do you have any sort of tools or advice for finding balance as a designer between making a tutorial that's sort of accessible, engaging, helpful versus the idea that you can't please everybody? That there are going to be some people that just don't enjoy it, it doesn't work for them. At what point do you stop trying to kill yourself making something that's going to work for everyone? And how do you get to that point without self-destructing?
Yeah, so your question is how can we create tutorials that are not trying to approach everything, right, while leaving some players behind? Yeah, it's I would say that playtest, of course, is very useful for that, but yeah, I will say that the more data and the better idea that you have, or on which, like if you have a good idea of the kind of players that will play your game, you can start from that point on. For example, I work for a while creating games for like little children. They were games for usually the target public was usually between 7 and 9, something like that. It's tricky because you assume that these players probably don't know a lot, which is false. I think I have seen my nephews playing, and it's So the thing is that you have to approach the tutorials by trying to engage in that frame of mind, right? There's a good story about I think Walt Disney, that he like used to see the attractions like that, right? Crouching, because it's like a kid will see everything. So I think that's a good approach. Again, it's easier said than done, but if you have a good idea of your players and you really try to be empathic about that, about maybe their previous experiences, right? It's a good start, but I don't think that there is a definitive answer. So yeah, of course not.
Hello.
Hello.
So imagine that you were preparing a playtest, like a big playtest with a lot of people who have never played your game. Would you ask them to run the tutorial first, or would you rather prefer them to just go into the game and see if they can figure out the game?
I will pretty much the second one. Yeah, I will prefer to just, if they want to play the tutorial, or if they don't want to play the tutorial, just leave them be, because that could be a very good opportunity, especially if you are in a playtesting session. It's not like the final game. I think it's a very good opportunity to get some feedback. If maybe your game, maybe not about the tutorial itself, but maybe about the game, right? If the game is approachable, if the game has maybe a very good user experience. So yeah, that maybe it's not useful for crafting and for creating a tutorial. Like if you really only want to get data to improve the tutorial, of course, forcing them. But it could be, I would say, a very good opportunity to get some feedback. And maybe in the next session you can force them, because, I don't know, maybe you detected that not many of the players that jumped the tutorial were doing well, yeah. So, yeah. Thanks.
First of all, just want to apologise for the UK, for the sheer amount of roundabouts that we do have. It's a ridiculous amount, so I'm very sorry for that. I wasn't really going to ask a question. I couldn't think of anything to ask. But then you mentioned XCOM 2, and you sparked my interest. Big XCOM fan. I found myself playing through XCOM 2's tutorial loads of times, and it just doesn't bother me. The reason for that is because it plays into the narrative. It's just more of the story. Like, you learn how things kind of, how things go. Is there distinct advantage to having a tutorial that's that ties into the narrative, or something that's a bit more fourth wall breaking, where it's like, this is the tutorial of a game, or something that's narrative and ingrained into that, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's like everything that I'm saying. It depends, but it kind of depends, right? Because, for example, if you are playing an historical game, right, like Crusader Kings or Medieval Total War, another kind of medieval game, but yeah, I'm a big medieval. Yeah, sorry, but you can make use of that, right? Because, for example, I remember Medieval 2, Total War. They start with, I think it was, England. So they have this whole narrative about England, and they basically teach you using the history of England in some way. I think it started, if I am correct, fighting against Scotland, maybe, or France. I don't know. A lot of wars in England too. But so it was embedded into the kind of real history, right? The same with Crusader Kings. They start from Ireland, and again, if you are maybe not, if your game doesn't have a big component of narrative, maybe it's not that necessary, right? But it could be useful, especially for a very complex game or a historical game, narrative game, to kind of embed the tutorial with the narrative, and vice versa. So even if you allow players maybe to jump some part of the tutorial, you can still, make use of less invasive tutorials, right? Small things, or popping, not necessarily the modal screen on the center of the screen that stops the game, and you run the risk of breaking first you break the agency most of the time, but also you risk losing the immersion, the player's immersion, so yeah. And don't apologize. Roundabouts are not that bad. I mean, they make you go slower. They're nice when you already know how to approach them. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you very much.